You guys aren't gonna believe this. The Florida Gators not only went a day without bad news, but they actually have good news. We're gonna talk about it here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Monday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants, Country, NFL 33. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Remember that Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. If you're part of the subtext group, appreciate you. Thanks. You knew about some of the Will Harris information leading up to it. If you're not part of the subtext group and you want to join, it's joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGators. Links in the description below. It's 2 weeks free, $5 a month after that. You get information, videos, film breakdowns we're getting on. But the Florida Gators yesterday announced the hire of Will Harris as a defensive backs coach. Will Harris had been the name that we've been talking about for quite some time in just Gator Nation, really. This felt like every day felt like, okay, we all kind of knew that it was Will Harris. It wasn't even that great of a kept secret. He was liking all of the Florida recruiting tweets. He was all over social media liking things and following players and media and coaches and everything. It wasn't a big secret, but finally got announced yesterday. I've said this before. I'm going to keep my stance here. I'm going to be cautiously optimistic about this hire. I get it. Spent 2018 to 2021 with Washington. Great. Like their secondaries during that time were elite. They had like top 15 in the country pass defenses. They were pumping out all Americans, first round picks. It was a whole thing. And again, and I've said this multiple times now, this isn't me doubting Will Harris. This is me saying that this is a big question I have regarding this hire. Yes, Washington had the All-Americans, the All-Conference players, the elite secondaries. How much of that was genuinely Will Harris and how much of it was Jimmy Lake? Because even before Will Harris got there, you had first-round caliber players there, like Byron Murphy, Buda Baker, guys that weren't Cardinals draft picks, but you had multiple like first round talents there, high draft grade talents. Because I think Byron Murphy was like this first or second pick in the second round, so whatever. But early draft pick talent was coming out of Washington in the secondary before Will Harris got there. It just continued coming out while he was there, which is why I say I don't know if it was Will Harris truly developing these guys or if it was Jimmy Lake, who's a fantastic DB guru at the college ranks, who is the DC and head coach there. But I don't know if it was Will Harris or Jimmy Lake developing the DBs. Here's the thing. I know Will Harris wasn't hurting the DBs. Like the production continued. So I'm not sure if it was mostly Will Harris or mostly Jimmy Lake during those last few years, if Jimmy Lake kind of took a step back and Will Harris took over, or if it was Jimmy Lake, then Will Harris got to watch Jimmy Lake, again, one of the best defensive back guru, recruiter, developer, whatever you want to call him. Will Harris got to watch him develop DBs. So he learned that same style. So the way I see it, I will be cautiously optimistic. And to answer that question of was it Will Harris, was it not? Here's the thing. If it was Will Harris, then great. He's proven himself as a developer. if it wasn't Will Harris and it was Jimmy Lake, we know Will Harris wasn't hurting the DBs because they were still fantastic while he was there. And and he got to spend those 4 seasons learning behind Jimmy Lake as a DB developer. So I truly like the answer to the question doesn't bother me either way. It's just am I cautiously optimistic or am I absolutely optimistic about it if it was him developing? So that's where I'm cautiously optimistic, like I said. I'm not doubting him. It's just a big question that I really can't answer. And we won't be able to answer until he's here. Spent 2022 as a Georgia Southern defensive coordinator after the whole Washington staff got fired after that 2021 season. He spent, I guess, the first 13 weeks, 14 weeks of this NFL season with the Los Angeles Chargers as an assistant defensive backs coach. Honestly, I feel like one of the reasons that he left now instead of waiting to finish out the year or whatever is because I don't think anybody's confident that Chargers coaching staff is going to have jobs by the time this show comes out. Honestly, things have gone from bad to worse there. So who even knows? But stylistically, Will Harris should be able to mesh pretty well with Austin Armstrong and that scheme that Austin Armstrong likes to run. Will Harris has plenty of experience with that. This is again where I say I'm cautiously optimistic about the hire. I will say that Will Harris is not putting that Will Harris is not being put in an easy situation to come into. He's coming into a 2024 recruiting class, not even the actual roster yet, just their recruiting class that has Xavier Filsaime committed for now. That one does not feel like it's going to stick. It turns out not having a DB coach for 2 weeks really didn't help Florida in that one. Then you look at the rest of the DB room, and it's Josiah Davis, a 3-star player, Teddy Foster, a 3-star corner. And that's it. That's your DB class for 2024. Josiah Davis, Teddy Foster are the ones that are expected to stick. However, the high-ranking one, Xavier Filsaime, is not. So he's stepping into a 2024 recruiting class that immediately, like already, isn't doing well in the secondary, not doing well. He's got to not even evaluate the high school targets or the current transfer portal targets. He's just got to sell them. He doesn't have to evaluate anybody. He just has to come in and say, "Look what I did at Washington." And that's where I've talked about this, where I'm like, oh, like I don't know if it was Jimmy Lake or if it was Will Harris. That doesn't matter because he's just going to tell them, "Look what happened at Washington while I was there," and that's all that matters as a selling point. So it's fine there. But I think that Will Harris is stepping into a rough spot to have to get into. Not sure which corners are coming back. Jason Marshall, Jalen Kimber are both free to go wherever they want. Because at this point, they'd be able to grad transfer or declare for the draft or whatever they want to do. So that's just it's a murky situation at corner. But the hope is that he's able to kind of amp up the development of the true freshman from this past cycle and the previous cycle to try to just rev up that development as quick as he possibly can. Devin Moore hopefully stays healthy, and you look like you got at least one pretty solid corner on the outside. Jakeem Jackson has the traits. Develop him as quick as you possibly can. But a player that doesn't need a ton of development that Florida is pursuing is Joey Slackman. We're going to talk about him in just a minute. I'm very excited for what he showed on film, what he can bring to Gainesville. But first, with passion, drive, and patience, that's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. And like I mentioned going into that, where Joey Slackman is a defensive lineman that hit the portal. And the moment he hit the portal, I feel like the college football world was like, this is a player. Like this is a player that's going to be nationally targeted, nationally recruited here. This is one of those ideal situations where you see a guy from outside of the Power Five who's played damn well at his level and is now looking to take the next step up to prove that he can do it at a Power Five level and prove to NFL teams that he can do it at a Power Five level. And I mentioned this last week, and people kind of got, I don't know, a couple people got like annoyed with me for it, where I talked about these are the guys you want to target, the guys outside of the Power Five, and you want to bring them in and you want to say, hey, prove what you can do against SEC talent, and NFL teams will not have the question of, yeah, he dominated, but he was at Penn. It was the Ivy League. Yeah, he had 7 pressures against Georgetown. That's Georgetown. It's not Georgia. Like you don't have that question. Cam Jackson from Memphis stepping up to the SEC. Osiris Torrance from Louisiana stepping up to the SEC. Yes, plenty of players are group of 5 talents that go to the NFL and thrive fine without going to the Power 5 to prove anything. However, when guys transfer from below the Power 5 to the Power 5, they're often just looking to prove that and compete on a bigger stage. I think that's what Joey Slackman's trying to do. I'm a fan of his game. I think that he could step in immediately and honestly probably start. He was on campus this past weekend for a visit. He left campus without committing, which isn't ideal. Like it's not bad in any way, shape, or form that he left campus without committing. But there was some hope that he would commit before he left campus, or that Florida would just be like, "Hey, man, we need like a big win here. Lock it down, like get him in." Didn't happen there. Not too concerned about it. He said that he was going to go back home to New York. I think it's from Comac, New York, and he was going to spend this upcoming weekend with his family, and then next week hopefully have an announcement. So it's not surprising that he left campus without committing. He's going to visit quite a few schools. I think it's North Carolina, Michigan. I want to say 1 or 2 more there that he's planning on visiting. But he did multiple interviews with multiple outlets after his visit, and he seemed to like what he was shown and what he was told. And I know that he even mentioned, like, hey, they don't have a D-line coach now, but they've told me that what their plan is and how they want to rebuild this thing and turn it around as quick as possible, and that they're doing their due diligence with defensive line guys. Which, if you're in this subtext, you heard what I heard about a defensive line coach. But one thing that stood out to me from the interviews he did was that Joey Slackman told him that Joey Slackman told outlets that the staff told him they see him as a big end, big tackle like he played at Penn. The part of that stood out to me was that the role he played at Penn, and if he were to play that role at Florida, that would put him in direct competition with Caleb Banks for playing time. I think Joey Slackman will win that. It's just interesting to me that that's the spot they're looking at right away. I would have thought, honestly, F would have been a pretty good spot to try to upgrade. And I think Joey Slackman could play that if he wanted to. He'd be big for the position, as in heavy, but I mean, if you can put him out there, I think he's got the physical skill set where he can do that. He's a bulldozer over there. And if you're going to have Tariq Sapp, Justice Boone, I don't think I've been shy. They haven't been overly impressive to me. Obviously not Justice Boone, but Tariq Sapp and that F spot this year wasn't overly impressive to me. Justice Boone last year when he was healthy wasn't overly impressive to me, even though he's coming off the bench there. So I get it. But I feel like that's a spot you could fit in. But if you're putting him into direct competition with Caleb Banks, you're clearly trying to beef up that pass rush from the interior. maybe you try Joey Slackman as like a passing down nose tackle, or Caleb Banks a passing down nose tackle. But Caleb Banks had the second most pressures on the team this year, and he's got the most pressures from returning guys because Princely is gone. So Caleb Banks had 24 pressures this year. That's the most amongst returning players here. And I think that's something where you're looking to upgrade that with Joseph. I mean, I'd look for someone on the edge at some point, right? You'd think that'd be something that they're trying to prioritize a little bit, unless they just view, Kelby Collins, TJ Searcy as ready to step up there. Um, but honestly, like you'd hope that they kind of lock some of those things in if they can keep LJ McCray, maybe that. But I'm curious just what that would mean for this defensive line rotation, because you still have Cam Jackson at nose, you still have Desmond Watson at nose. You would have Joey Slackman, Caleb Banks, Jamari Lyons all competing for that 3 tech spot, that big end, big tackle, whatever you want to call it. So I'd be very interested to see how they approach that one. Like I said, I think Joey Slackman's someone who could step in immediately and play and contribute, and I think just add some juice to the interior pass rush here. Or again, if you're going to play him as that strong side end, I honestly don't have much of an issue with that. I think he'd be capable of doing it. I think he's got that in his bag. But I'm curious what the selling point is there as well, because it's not like, you lost everybody. So I'd imagine he's being told you'd come in and start right away, and Caleb Banks would rotate in, which Caleb Banks also wasn't, starting the entire year at that spot and just wreaking havoc the whole time. He's rather inconsistent. Not that he was bad, but rather inconsistent. One of the, again, better pass rushers on the team, but he was listed as starter a lot, and then had games where he played like 20 snaps and wasn't a big time impact player. But he had his moments, and I think that's a big selling point for him. I would like to see him hit home more as Princely as well. But I think that you're looking at Joey Slackman as an immediate starter if he does come in, and Caleb Banks, not a flight risk at all, but more of a rotational. Maybe you play Caleb Banks how I thought you should have played Chris McClellan, where he goes to the nose in light spots and 3 tech and heavy spots, and you move him around a little bit and have a little bit of fun with that positional versatility, I guess, there. And then also this past weekend, Florida had a few flip candidates on campus. One flip candidate basically cut it off, but Florida flipped targets, not candidates leaving Florida. Not this time. We're about to talk about them. Before we do that, let me tell you guys about Prize Picks, because Prize Picks has been the best way for me to make money playing daily fantasy sports this year. If you've got skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few easy taps and research. It's simple and easy to play with quick withdrawals too. That is always going to be the most important thing right there for me. At least I like to get my money quick. I don't like you got to wait 48 hours. Shut the hell up and give me my money. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Remember that Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. There are 3 flip targets that we're going to talk about now for the Florida Gators. First off is going to be Texas running back Jarrett Gibson. And Jarrett Gibson, of course, committed to Texas a long time ago. At this point, kind of just felt like Florida was just going to be like, all right, deuces then. And then recent weeks, there's been a little bit of traction of Florida's trying to make some way. Florida's going to push for Gibson a bit. Yesterday, Jarrett Gibson comes out and says, shutting it down, staying with Texas. Not ideal. To me, I thought the plan was Florida's targeting 2 running backs that are both flip targets in Jarrett Gibson and Jaden Ball. To me, the thought process was, if you lose Trevor Etienne, which seemed like a very likely option at the time. This is like last week, 2 weeks ago, when we were just like waiting for Trevor Etienne to make the announcement. You lose Trevor Etienne, you replace him with Jarrett Gibson, because Jarrett Gibson's an immediate player, an immediate contributor for your team. So you lose half your carries, you lose about half of your yards. You lose half your production from the running, or we'll say 40%, 30% of the production from the running back spot, since Montreal had a significantly bigger impact as a pass catcher. But you lose a ton of your production. You go replace him with an immediate impact player like Jared Gibson. Kanan Daniels is your running back 2 in the class. Call it that. Trevor left. Jared Gibson shut down his recruitment. Looking at Arkansas running back commit Jaden Baugh, again, if Trevor Etienne leaves, you go for Jared Gibson. If you don't get Jared Gibson, you go for Jaden Baugh. That's what this is here. Jaden Baugh has said he's still deciding, but Florida does and should feel good about this one. Again, not that it's going to happen, but it kind of feels like at this point Florida's the lean. Like, yes, he's an Arkansas commit, but it feels like he's more Florida right now. I know that Billy Napier and Jabbar Jalouk will visit Jaden Baugh on Tuesday, hoping that they can not just make progress there, but actually lock something in and get the flip on Tuesday and hopefully get him to shut it down, because Jaden Baugh, I'm sorry, I forgot who I read it from, but Jaden Baugh recently has been contacted by Alabama as well. So Alabama is now in play for Jaden Baugh. Arkansas is obviously trying to keep Jaden Baugh. Florida is trying to flip Jaden Baugh. And again, it feels like it's more Florida than Arkansas or Alabama at this point. There's no traction with Alabama right now, but plenty of time for things to happen here. But I think Jaden Baugh is someone who would step in, and you look at that recruiting class at that point as Jaden Baugh is running back to Kanan Daniels, whereas if you were to flip Jared Gibson, it's Jared Gibson is running back 1 to Kanan Daniels. But with Jaden Baugh, I get it that there's other running backs out there that people like more. This staff like Jaden Baugh. Watching his film, I think he had a little bit of wiggle, a little bit of vision to his game, but I don't know. I like watching him. I don't think he translates to an immediate contributor as an SEC running back. I think that's more Kanan Daniels. I think Kanan Daniels' vision is, I've said it before, his vision for a running back is, or for a high school running back, is pretty damn good. Like, it's a very natural feel, and you can see that. I don't see that as much with Jaden Baugh, but he's also played Wildcat QB, wide receiver, running back, the slot, like the nickel DB. So he's played a lot of spots. He's hadn't really had time to focus on a specific position to develop on. So I don't think he looks more of a natural guy, but again, someone that comes in as running back too, and he shows promise. It's just he doesn't have a ton of snaps at running back to make me think he could step in right away in the SEC. But again, you got the visit Tuesday. If you can lock that in, you're looking like you're getting another public perception win, which Florida desperately needs. The last player that we're going to talk about today, Alabama cornerback commit Jameer Grimsley, said he's still considering Florida and that he wants to meet Will Harris and then see how it goes from there. Like he's flat out said he wants to meet Will Harris, see how that meeting goes, and then kind of try to decide things from that point. And it seemed to me like he meant decide if he's still going to consider Florida once he meets Will Harris, and not decide if he's going to commit to Florida right there, but just decide if he's still willing to be courted by Florida. And we talked about this earlier in the week, where he's obviously still genuinely trying to decide where he's going to college. I think he ends up at Bama. I don't think he's someone to flip, or I don't think he's someone that will flip. But I think that when you just kind of read the tea leaves for Jameer Grimsley, it reads as he is at least open still to the idea of going to Florida. He's been in contact with this staff quite a bit. There was last week, Billy Gonzalez went to visit him in Tampa, because Billy Gonzalez was in Tampa anyway, visiting Isaiah Williams. So Billy Gonzalez went to visit him 2 weeks ago. Sorry, 2 weeks. The day that the visits opened, so December 1st. So Billy Gonzalez went to visit him. They spoke there. You look at last Thursday, Jameer Grimsley got a visit from Austin Armstrong at his school. So you got 2 visits in person there. You look at the Florida State game, Jameer Grimsley, I believe it was the Florida State game Jameer Grimsley was at, either Florida State or Arkansas, but one of those last games. Jameer Grimsley was at, went for his visit there. Came to campus this past weekend. He is set to have Will Harris, Billy Napier, and Austin Armstrong all at his house this coming Friday. This coming Friday, he's supposed to have all 3 of those coaches visit him there at his house. This is clearly someone that is still open to communication. Again, I clearly Florida is putting pressure here, and clearly Florida is trying to get this flip to actually happen with Jameer Grimsley. But at the same, and again, I think he winds up at Bama. But this is clearly a kid who is open to this line of communication. He's clearly still listening here. He's had multiple coaching visits in the past month and a half at the most. He's been on campus twice. I think that was his first game at the Swamp ever too. Again, I forgot if Florida State. It was Florida State. So he was on campus there. So in the past month, he's been on campus twice. He's had coaches visit him twice. He's going to have another in-home visit this coming week with coaches for a 3rd time. So while, yeah, it still feels like it's Alabama's recruit to lose, he's still at least entertaining the idea of going to Florida. And again, he said he has to meet Will Harris and see how that goes. And again, if I'm Will Harris, I'm like, look at all these guys that went to Washington in recent years that are in the secondary, went to Washington, and are in the NFL now. Look at who their DB coach was when they were at Washington. Look at who recruited them, who developed them. You see my name there? Yeah, I do that. And that's your selling point. That's all you have to do is your selling point. I know it's easier said than done, but that's the big selling point. You go, yeah, you're a blue chip corner, great talent. I get guys to the NFL too. Here, you can be a part of the turnaround. I know they're selling him on that of, you could be a part of something special if you can turn this team around. But for Will Harris, that's got to be your selling point. And impress him a bit with your resume. Impress him a bit with just technological I guess logic, we'll say, technological terms. Just use fancy crap and convince the kid that he should be a Gator, because you need help at corner. This is your first uphill climb as the DB's coach at Florida. There's a flip candidate that's also being recruited by Bama, but you at least have a foot in the door here. Get all the way in. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow, talk more Florida Gators football. Maybe later today if something big happens. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole 9 Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33, and I will see you all tomorrow.